Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe, foe, foe. Scoring touchdowns for the blue. On blue, the Argos will win for you. Full of fight and courage, you can't stop. They pile up the points until they reach the top. Pull together till the gray cups won. Go Argos, go, go, go. Fight the foe, foe, foe. Scoring touchdowns for the blue on blue. The Argos will win for you. Full of fight and courage, you can't stop. They pile up the points until they reach the top. Pull together till the gray cups won. Go Argos, go Toronto, go. Go Argos, go, go, go.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 10 of the Argo Bounce live audio show about the 18-time CFL Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts with my co-host Nick Small. And tonight we're going to be breaking down the Argos 29-26 exciting comeback win against Saskatchewan and preview the game against Ottawa on Saturday at 7 o'clock, which is the Argos season final before the East final takes place Saturday, November 11th at 3 p.m. at BMO Field. And this year, the CFL moved the playoffs to Saturdays instead of Sunday as well. Give me 1 second. I'm going to bring on my co-host, Nick Small, and we're going to talk a little bit of Toronto Argonauts. And we have a special guest tonight as well, and we're going to bring him on in about 2 minutes. Good evening, Nick. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Chris. Doing great. I mean, clearly, I need to work on what I predict with some of these games where I don't have much faith in the opposition because it ended up being an absolutely incredible game. Saskatchewan led for a good chunk of the game, but Toronto came clawing back, and there was that sensational ending by Cameron Dukes driving down to win. So it says a lot about this team's fight, the way that they can have their backups in and still be extremely competitive with the rest of the league. In some of these guys could probably end up becoming first stringers, and so it's a really good moral victory for Toronto.
And also, I forgot to mention the Argo Bounce live audio show is on Raku TV on demand, Northeast Streaming Sports, thanks to Linda McGrath and Mac, and also on radio station WQEE 99.1 FM. As well, Nick, we have a special guest tonight, and I'm going to bring him on. He's a friend of mine, and his name is Griff Bordignon. He's with Crier Media, and he's also our Argos reporter as well. And I'm going to bring him on, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Argos with Griff. Hey, Griff, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How are the two of you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Good. Griff, thanks.
No problem. Always happy to talk about the Argonauts, especially at this time of the year when we're so close to the finish line.
Especially when it's 15-2, on track for one of the best seasons in Toronto Argonauts history, and on the 150th year anniversary, no less. I mean, what more could you possibly want?
I completely agree with you on all of those points. It's kind of funny because I remember the last time that I was on with Chris was right before their first loss to Calgary, and I told Chris that felt like a trap game. And it was, and I spoke to Winton McManus after the Edmonton game, and he said that was a real turning point in the team's season. So I have a question for you guys. Do you think that 16-2 is, I know it would be a really cool milestone, especially on the team's 150th year, and also doing my first year covering the team. But I look at it as, if they went 15-3, it's not the worst thing in the world because it's, instead of that riding the high horse into the postseason, because like Chris, you know this from our talks on the Go Train.
Yes.
This CFL postseason seems like it's anyone's game.
Absolutely. And hey, I've seen a lot of great Argonaut teams in the past have great regular season records and get upset in the playoffs. And then I've seen some Argonaut teams that only won 8, 9, 10 games and do some upsets as well. And yeah, I was going to say anything can happen in the CFL playoffs. I'll get Nick's thoughts on this too. I would love to see the Argos go 16-2, but I'm not going to be devastated if they don't. What I want to see as a fan and a media member of the team as well is that 19th Grey Cup. I think that's more of a priority than the 16 win. Nick?
Yeah, I mean, the way they're playing, though, I think even with their second strings, they could, and against Ottawa, they can definitely make it to that 16-game win season. But I think where it comes to is you're looking at it at that sort of regular season legacy. Winning the Grey Cup, of course, is the milestone that we all seek, and we want to see them win number 19 this year. But only one other time before as a team had 16 wins. So it's as big a milestone that will be in the record books and remembered as well, even if this team doesn't end up winning a Grey Cup. But I think the way that they've been playing and they've showed all year long is that in all of these games, except for that Calgary game and arguably the Winnipeg game, they've been the better team in almost every game. So they've proven that this is a team that can beat almost anybody they come up against. So I think in terms of the expectations in the playoffs, you definitely want to make the Grey Cup and win this East final on the 11th. But yeah, the Grey Cup itself, I think, is going to be more of a toss-up, but the goal especially needs to be get to that Grey Cup.
Chris, do you want to go from here or can I chime in?
No, go ahead, Griff. Go ahead, bud.
Because that's a big thing with this team right now is that it's been a 1-0 mentality every single week. Even the Grey Cup rematch, like after the Hamilton game, we were all like, and that was my big question to Ryan was, hey, how do you approach this? And he said, you know what? The media can say what they want. This has nothing to do with the Grey Cup rematch. This is just a new week in the CFL. Chance to rest guys, chance to get guys healthy. Like that's the thing with this Saturday too. You're going to see a roster that's very, very diminished. Like look at the injury report, guys like Stiggers, guys like Harris won't be coming back. AJ won't be playing. Davaris Daniels, who's been known this year so far as an Ottawa killer. He had 3 touchdowns in the first home game, and I believe he had another one in the game a couple weeks ago that I had to miss, unfortunately. But this is a game right here that is just, get through this game healthy without any significant loss. Hopefully the backups can do their job to where, hey, the secondary unit has a lot of trust within the coaching staff. And I want to answer this question quickly. I don't have a problem with them playing Chad because I feel like at the end of the day, it's going to be Chad's call. But this week, have him dress like he's doing. He's going to dress, but he's not going to play. That was very established by Dinwiddie early in the week. Have him dressed because you want him there to kind of be in that ready moment in case they may thrust him in just because, look, it's 2 weeks between then and now. And I don't know between Montreal or Hamilton, but I will tell you this right now. It's great for marketing, but I do not want to see Hamilton in the East final.
Griff and Nick, I want to say something to you too. The Argonauts have not beat Hamilton in the Eastern Final in Toronto since 1983. The last 4 times they've played the Cats in the East Finals in Toronto, they've lost. I would like to see that streak. And I think personally, I'll let Nick chime in here. Personally, Hamilton, Montreal, I think whoever wins that game is going to give the Argos a good run for it in the East Final. But I still think the Argos, talent-wise and depth-wise, should get back to the Grey Cup. But anything can happen in the CFL playoffs. And like I said, we'll see what happens. Nick?
Yeah, what's really interesting is that they're playing in Montreal against each other right now, like for this week, right before playing again in the East semifinal. So it's a really weird scenario where they have this chance to kind of feel each other out, and you kind of wonder, are they going to do like what the Argonauts are planning, where they're not going to play anyone major and let it kind of be a throwaway game, or are they going to try to do some things to try to just play some mind games with each other in preparation for the East semifinal? The thing that doesn't really, I'm not particularly worried against either team though. Like, although Hamilton's been on a big run recently, I find the thing though with Hamilton is that you've beat them 4 times, and exception maybe the first game where it was a little close. Until they broke away in the last part of the game. I think Toronto's clearly established themselves as a team that can shut down Hamilton in almost every situation. So it's going to be really interesting, I think, to see who we end up going up against. But I think seeing how it sets a perfect picture for what's to come by having this sort of preview to the East semifinal now, with it being the last week of the season, and then going into the playoff game.
I only said what I said about Hamilton just because, look, I know Toronto did get the best of them, especially to the fact that the 2 games in Hamilton, Toronto won handedly, and Ticat fans went home unhappy. But imagine just for the team and Hamilton and for the organization to where, hey, Toronto's been this big bad bully for you all year long, and you have the chance to rewrite all your wrongs, beat them in Toronto, and host the Grey Cup in your own stadium and try to break your own 24-year curse. Now, do we want to see that happen? No. I'm just saying they're a team that worries me more because their defense has been playing really well. I keep getting his name wrong, but they have a really good corner, Greek guy. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I think you guys know who I'm talking about. Who's been playing well, and just they've been on a tear. Look, they've beaten Winnipeg. Actually, they lost to BC at home. They beat Calgary. They've just been going through it all to where I think this Hamilton team is just, look, you get them in, they're fine. Meanwhile, with Montreal, I think the Toronto D-line can just continue to do what they did and just torment Cody Fajardo. I know there's 2 games that were really close, the ones in Montreal, but the one game in Toronto, remember, Toronto won handedly 38-10. So I feel like that's why I'd rather see the Alouettes. But regardless, I expect BMO Field to be loud come 16 days from now on November 11th.
It's pretty to see that they've sold out pretty much all of their conventional seating that they've had through the regular season, and now they've opened up the north side seats, and they've opened up the upper deck, and they're pretty much the only seats left, I think, unless you're coming by yourself or buying off a reseller. So it's a really good problem to have in Toronto.
Exactly, 100%. The big question for me, though, is just, look, with Toronto, how much of, like, because look, you see all those teams, like how Chris was saying, not Chris, how you're saying earlier, the 40-year drought by not beating Toronto at home.
Yep.
But I looked at the last 16-2 team, which is the 1989 Edmonton Eskimos, and they lost in the West final. So to the eventual Grey Cup winner, Saskatchewan. So that's where I kind of look at it from where I'm worried about Toronto getting too comfortable, but at the same time, too, I know that this isn't that team, that they're coached and they have a different mentality to not get caught up in that hype. So we'll see what happens. But the one point I want to make about this week's game with Toronto and Ottawa, it's just I'm looking at Ottawa's perspective from this game where it's kind of like, hey, you got nothing to lose. 2023 is a write-off. Hopefully 2024, they make that next leap because them and Edmonton are in that similar categories. Meanwhile, you have like Saskatchewan, the third team out of the playoff picture, where it's just going backwards. Like I called that Labor Day Monday where their season peaked against Winnipeg with that overtime win in the Banjo Bowl. But going back to Toronto, I like I said, I want to see them in Hamilton. I like them in Hamilton. It's just a matter of, can they face adversity? Because think about that too with the whole, like what I was saying, Chris, with the whole Hamilton argument. Imagine if you're Hamilton and you're going into the East Final in Toronto, 9-0 at home this year, and Hamilton can say, hey, let's go win the one game, because that's the one thing I will say, though, if it is Toronto-Hamilton. The BMO Field will just be that much more. Because think about it, like I can't imagine many Ticat fans have bought tickets already, but if they make it in, there's a very good chance that attendance creeps up over 25,000 people, especially if it's the Ticats. If it's the Alouettes, I feel like it has the same appeal, but it's not that much of an appeal. Yeah. Meanwhile, if you get Hamilton in there, like I'll be honest with you, the Hamilton-Toronto games this year, the first one, there was a lot of Hamilton fans. There weren't a lot of Hamilton fans here at BMO on September 23rd. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think this week's game is going to be more of a, for Montreal-Hamilton quickly, instead of a feeler out or try to play mind tricks, I think it's just more, hey, both teams are going to kind of be like, all right, let's just do our things and get to next Saturday healthy. And then next Saturday, the two of them can duke it out to see who comes to BMO Field on the 11th.
Okay, and I want to do a shout out here to Brian Snow. He's got his own podcast show in the States. He's a huge CFL fan. So, Brian Snow, thanks for coming in here. Obviously, he's going for the Argos. And we have Daniel Aboye's dad, Ty, watching as well. I want to say thank you so much for watching. And speaking of Daniel, Griff, I want to get your opinion, Griff, and Nick's on Daniel's performance against the Rough Riders. 9 carries, 109 yards, and the game-winning touchdown at the end.
You know what? Honestly, it's just this team has been so predicated on that next man up mentality. And Daniel's kind of a part of that, kind of like how we've seen Cameron Dukes grow into that role. Guys like Mason Pierce, who had the game-winning interception, Jonathan Eduardo in the game against Calgary. This team is so predicated on next man up that it's so great to see, hey, Andrew Harris hasn't played. He's on the 6-game list. He should probably be playing the East Final, though. AJ Ouellette, they've really restricted him ever since they clinched. Deontay McMahon's been a nice surprise as well. But for Daniel, it's been great that, you know what, hey, he gets to have a significant role in his team. I know he's been a special teamer for most of the year, but the fact that he got to go in there, get the touchdown, and be a part of such a game-motivating drive. Because think about it. That game had more for Saskatchewan on the line than it did Toronto. Toronto is just, hey, it's another game. Let's just get to November 11th. But the fact, too, that their second and even third units are coming in and contributing to levels of that proportion, it just screams out the great head coaching job that Ryan Dinwiddie has done with this team this year.
Yeah, I think you gotta give big credit to the athletic training staff too. Like when you look at AJ Ouellette and Daniel Attaboy side by side, like they're just absolute specimens. And that carry that he had, the one where he ran something like 50 yards. The thing I remember most of it was on the commentary when Rod Smith thought it was AJ Ouellette carrying it. It's like, oh no, it's not. It's Attaboy. But powering it through on that absolutely insane carry. And then he had one later where there were like 4 guys on top of him and he's just still trucking through. They have the exact same kind of running back philosophy, and that true back able to massive yardage. It's just so exciting to see, because it shows that all the training that they've put in, and especially Attaboy, who hasn't necessarily had the chances to star at running back, even though he's been a great special teams player, to see it finally prove itself. And then when you throw McMahon into the mix and you have that ability to have a power back and a good blocker, but then you're also able to put someone who's a bit more swift and agile like McMahon, it opens up your playbook in amount of plays where you can have guys coming in on motion. You can have the running back start outside, but then have him move in the block or swap them around prior to the snap. You can do so many unique things and just think outside the box. Fences just are absolutely struggling. And that's what's really set Toronto's offense up for so much success in the passing game, because they always have to play to cover run. Because if they don't, it allows Attaboy or Ouellette to break a massive gain.
Griff, I wanted to ask you this, by the way. Have you been able to go to Argo's practice this week at all and speak to the coaching staff? And what's the latest on Andrew Harris, Curly Gittens Jr., Enoch, and Maurice Cornell? I know Enoch and Cornell have been out the whole year. Have you heard anything from the coaching staff about them being available for the Ottawa game or the East Final, possibly?
Unfortunately, I have not. I didn't get the chance to go to practice this week.
Okay.
Hopefully, if they do, I'm not too sure what's going to be happening next week, if they're going to be practicing or doing walkthroughs. But if there is the chance for that, I want to go down and talk to them, obviously, just because, look, it is the gearing up towards the playoffs. I just had some other commitments that got in the way this week to where I wasn't able to make it down. As it stands, though, like AJ's not playing. Like I said, AJ's not playing this week. Andrew Harris is out for this week. Other players that are on 6 games, like Curly Gittens Jr. and Robertson Daniel, both are not playing this week. So, for as far as I know, I'm not too sure who's going to be back for the East Final. But all I know is with Ottawa, like I have the injury report, so I can just read it out loud right now of the keynote guys that are not going to be dressing as I ad-lib was what trying to get it. Like, for example, same thing too. Maurice Cornell is not going to be playing. Tavares Daniels isn't playing. Essentially, this has been Ryan Dinwiddie's. So basically, all the guys you asked about are out of the roster for Saturday. But Ryan's thing since that Hamilton win is, if you're banged up, we're not going to play you because we don't want to risk further injury. It could be a very small injury, but at the same time too, he, like how we're talking about November 19th, wanting to be in Hamilton. That was a big topic on Labor Day too with a lot of the guys, because, hey, they got the big win in Hamilton, and hopefully that the next game for them there was November 19th. So that's been the goal all year, is just, hey, we want our guys healthy for November 11th, and we want our guys hopefully healthy for November 19th. I'm only saying hopefully just because, look, it's not a guarantee that Toronto's going to get there, but right now I wouldn't bet against them.
Okay. Hey, Griff, do you have time for 3 more minutes?
Yeah, not a problem.
Okay, this one I wanted to ask you and Nick. I'll let you guys answer it. What are your thoughts on Cameron Duke's performance against Saskatchewan?
He's been a very good quarterback even throughout the whole season, but Saskatchewan especially, I felt like he had more of a chance to play than he did against Winnipeg. I felt like Winnipeg, it was just kind of like, okay, here you go, get in the lineup and play. Meanwhile, with the game against Saskatchewan, he looked a lot more calm. He looked a lot more poised. He didn't make the same mistakes that he did against Saskatchewan or even that he did in relief against Edmonton, even though that game was out of hand. But overall, I've been impressed with Cameron Dukes from the jump. I first noticed him when he got the quarterback sneaks against the BC Lions, which really surprised me. Fun fact, I don't know how much betting you guys are, but that's the only game this year where the Toronto Argonauts were an underdog going into the game. Or actually, the last time, I believe they were as well for their home opener because everyone thought it was going to be Winnipeg and Hamilton in Hamilton this year. But Toronto's been this nice surprise because that's the thing. Like how last year was just, hey, they barely got in. They barely got in and they won the Grey Cup. Meanwhile, this year, they've basically had the keys to the kingdom the entire season. But overall, with Dukes, I was very impressed. And the only other thing, Chris, going back to your point earlier when you asked about Enoch, I still feel like Enoch probably won't play again. He hasn't played all season, so I just don't see a point of getting him in the lineup. Plus, I feel like if he were to have returned, he would have done so probably back in the middle of August. I would say around the first Ottawa game.
Okay.
So I don't see a world where he's there. I can just probably see him. I think I wouldn't be shocked to see him retire and probably take on a community role, kind of like a Matt Black has done ever since he retired.
And broadcasting too.
Yes.
Absolutely. Nick, thoughts on Cameron Dukes?
To kind of go back on the Enoch thing, challenging part is with someone who hasn't played all season, and you could say the same with someone like Curly Giddens, who's been earlier in the year but hasn't played much. Do you really want to mess around with the chemistry that the guys who have played the majority of the season have built on? That can sometimes be a challenge. In terms of Cam Dukes, though, yeah, I was also really impressed, and I learned some statistics about his performance, and he's actually had a better one of these kind of like light debut seasons. If you want to compare it with Chad Kelly and his coach Ryan Dinwiddie, he's had better both of them in their debut years, like Kelly last year and Dinwiddie, although it's a little unfair for him because his first game was in the Grey Cup in 2007, so that was a bit of a tough situation for him. But yeah, Cam Dukes has actually put up some really stellar numbers, and I think because you're playing in the shadow of someone like Chad Kelly, it is hard to stand out. But I've been really impressed by his play, and yeah, he looked really calm in the Saskatchewan game and looked to adjust more, and I think he's grown into that role now as the backup quarterback and understanding kind of what role he needs to play in the CFL game. It's really hard, and I think often we overestimate how difficult it is for guys coming in from college ball to play in the CFL with the waggle and with the wider field. So for him to have so quickly in under only a year to trade for someone, well, it seems like the answer now is no, because Cam Dukes has proven he can do the job.
The other thing I want to say is I feel like they're going to run back the same quarterback room next year because obviously Chad Kelly's locked into the 3-year extension, but Cameron Dukes, I feel like, is someone who eventually will probably get a chance to start in the CFL. I don't know if it'll be Toronto or elsewhere. I know he's younger than Chad, but at the same time, too, I feel like if a team like in Ottawa, because like I'm still not sold on Darren Crum or even a Saskatchewan or a Montreal, because where the quarterback room is kind of in question marks, he can start. But I feel like Saturday, too, we'll get a chance to see Brian Scott as well in action, just because I know they're going to rely. They're going to rely on the two of them, especially, too, because if the game's out of hand, and like I said, too, because Hal Dukes is still a very important part, even with the first team with the QB sneaks. Yeah. I feel like there's a very good chance we'll see a lot of Brian Saturday night in Ottawa as well.
Oh, I was going to say, Griff, I don't want to sound negative here. I know Kelly signed a 3-year deal, but there is an out if there's an offer for him in the NFL. I personally hope he stays in Toronto, but fingers crossed, we'll see what happens there. Brian Scott, I had the pleasure of interviewing him after the last home game, and this is the first time in his football career that he's never been a starting quarterback, and he told me how much of an adjustment it is. But he told me that, hey, if they need him to go on the field, God forbid something happens to Chad or Cameron, he said he'll be ready. And it was good to talk to him just to get his perspective on going from being a starter his whole career to a backup. And I think Brian Scott too, at some point, hopefully maybe next year in the future, I think he could be a good CFL quarterback as well.
The one thing I'll say about Chad quickly on that comment, I can see a world where he gets a camp invite. I just can't see him because he already is 30 where he gets a solid chance to start unless there's a team like a Doug Flutie situation. We'll see what happens.
Yes.
Like I know right around Calgary, it was talks of like, hey, he may go back to the CFL. And then I feel like that's why they gave him not just like an extension, but they gave him, hey, the highest paid player, even though the CFL doesn't release those numbers. His agent leaked that almost immediately. Like, because I was at the press conference when the impromptu press conference down at Lamport when Chad did sign that contract. And the news broke right away that, yeah, he is making more than Caleros. But ultimately, I feel like he knows that Toronto, look, it's helped rebuild his character. It's helped rebuild him as a quarterback, and it's given him a second life playing football. Like, I know obviously NFL is the end goal for a lot of these guys because it is the top tier of football. But I feel like, look, he knows, like, the two major factors into this is that he's here, he can start, and also to the fact that he's only 90 minutes away from Buffalo, New York.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to also mention, like, if that happens, like, his contract will be gone here in Toronto, and it's like he'll probably be paying out of pocket then and net loss to try to operate out in if he doesn't get that NFL opportunity. So it is a huge financial risk. I think you really have to consider, like, if you can stay in a city like this in Toronto where, you know, as you said, you're gonna get playing time, you're gonna be the guy, and you know, the fans love him here in Toronto. So to lose all that potentially at an NFL shot that might not even come true, it'll be a huge risk if he does take it, unless he's guaranteed like starter opportunities there. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. But I'm glad he signed that extension because it is a good. I think it's a good scenario for everybody involved: fans, players, the organization, and Chad, of course.
Hey, Griff, I know you got a show at 8:15 tonight, so I definitely, me and Nick would definitely like to have you back on our show again, and definitely as a guest again. What your show is, what, 8:15 tonight? Can you tell our audience a little bit about your upcoming podcast tonight at 8:15?
8, but it's actually my recording time got pushed back to 8:30. So if you guys still have a little bit of time, I'm free to stay on a little bit longer. But the show I do is called YWC Football Talk. My show is NFL and CFL based, but tonight's episode, it's more NFL focused just because we are going to be looking at the Week 8 slate. Me and my co-host, his nickname, his Twitter handle is actually BigRat310, so go give him a follow there. He knows a lot about football, a lot more than me, even though I'm the host of the show. But we're just running down the Week 8 preview because he's a Dolphins fan, I'm a Pats fan, and the two of us are bucking heads this week. And as for CFL, one thing, I don't know, like I said, how much of your audience is into gambling, but I have been writing weekly articles about my best bets of the CFL, which I'm going to be publishing tomorrow, which will feature the 3 games this week, which are Winnipeg and Calgary, I want to say, is the Friday night game. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then obviously there's the prelude to the Eastern semi at 4:00 on Saturday, and then Toronto, Ottawa Saturday. So I got to go look at what the options are and then bet from there. So you can follow me for all my bets on Crier. You can find my link through my Twitter, which is in the bio here at Mr. Griff B. But no, that's pretty much tonight's podcast there. And then next week, I'll probably be having, and throughout the CFL playoffs, Dave Morisuti and I are going to be breaking down all the CFL playoff action. So stay tuned for all of that. That's a news drop for you guys as well, because I haven't announced it publicly yet.
Okay, and David's a great guy too, by the way. Nick?
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. I love chatting with David. He's real Canadian game and the Argonauts. One last question I'll ping for you. I'll put it just plain and simple. Who are you taking, Argonauts or Red Blacks this week?
I'm going to take the Argos, but I will probably take Ottawa to cover because I feel like this will be a much closer game than we think. And the same thing too with Winnipeg and Calgary. I feel like Winnipeg's just going to take care of business because, look, I've always been on the BC Lions to get to the West, to represent the West in the Grey Cup. That's been my hot take throughout the year. But Winnipeg has just looked unstoppable lately. The fact that, like, they just went up there and put up 45 on Edmonton like it was nothing. And then Hamilton, Montreal. I'm going to go Hamilton. Like I said, I think the Tabbies are just the hot team right now. And I think that, you know what? They've, like, like I said, the Ticats are pretty much playing with house money right now, because think about it. Basically, if you look at their schedule throughout the last 3 months, they've only had 3 really bad games, and that was the loss to Edmonton, which was that rain-soaked just monsoon game back in August, and then the 2 games against Toronto. Besides that, they have been borderline unstoppable for the last couple months. So we'll see what happens, but CFL season's already done. It's kind of unfortunate, but you know what? This is when the best football happens, because like they say, anything can happen in the CFL. And you guys were talking about this earlier, but can I just make one quick point?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep. I really like the Saturday playoff games instead of Sunday. Obviously, look, I'll first admit, I've gotten to have better appreciation for the CFL this year, but I'm always an NFL guy by heart. I just like the fact that not like the fact, but I get the fact of why they chose Saturdays better, because it's especially too if you're a Leaf fan, watch for the East Final. Watch the Argos play at 3, Leafs and Canucks play at 7 o'clock that night. So unless you're a BC fan and they're in the West Final, and then you're kind of in trouble. But with the Saturday games, I feel like you're just going to get a better TV audience. And for as big as it is to draw people into the stands, to get those TV eyes that would normally be watching the NFL, there's no going back and forth unless you're a college football nut like myself.
Yes.
But that is the ultimate thing I wanted to say. And also, too, I like the start times of 3 and 6 o'clock. Because I remember when I worked the Labor Day game this year, 3 o'clock was out of there by 7. Who knows what November 11th is going to be like for my schedule, what time I'll be out of there, because obviously it's a bit different. But I like the fact, too, better that they changed it to 3 to 6 than the usual 1 to 4.
Nick, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I stays in the afternoon time. I don't really mind particularly whether it's 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, but I do like that it's that semifinals and finals are all kind of afternoon games, and then you sort of anticipate the big Grey Cup game happening at 6 or 7 o'clock ish on the Sunday, with it being but yeah, I as long as that time frame's the same, I don't think I really care particularly if whether it's Saturday or Sunday. And yeah, we'll see how it turns out, because this is coming into the first real test of it. Coming into the games this week, Winnipeg, Calgary, I think is going to be really interesting. I think Calgary has a lot. If they can keep it close against Winnipeg, there's a chance, that sort of glimmer of hope that after kind of squeaking in the playoffs, it leaves that possibility that Jake Meyer could lead this team to upset wins against BC and Winnipeg. So I'm still going to pick Winnipeg there, but I hope Calgary can at least keep it close. Hamilton, Montreal, that's a toss-up game. I think at home, Montreal is going to have a bit of an edge, so I'm going to take them. And between Toronto and at 15-2, so you got to pick Toronto, I think, even with these scenarios with the backups coming in. Ottawa's probably still going to play pretty much full out, knowing that their season's done. But you gotta support the Argos at their shot of history. So I'm going to take them. Okay,
I'm going to give you guys my picks. I'm going to go with Calgary over Winnipeg in an upset, because Winnipeg has nothing to play for. I think Calgary, I just think they're going to upset them. That's my gut feeling. Hamilton and Montreal, I'm going to go with Hamilton. And Toronto, Ottawa, I got to go with the Argos. As much I know the game's meaningless for the Argos, but this team just seems to know how to win. So even with their second or third string guys in, I think they'll win. But I think it'll be a very close, competitive game.
Oh, Chris, if Winnipeg, we call it chicken. Do we call it chicken if they like they were calling out the Argonauts for arresting don't play Collaros?
Don't stoop down to the level of their competition. I think that Zach Collaros is going to want to go out there and prove something, especially considering and Justin Dunk from Third Down Nation was posting about this, the voter fatigue to why Brady Oliveira got their most outstanding player award and not Collaros for a third straight year. So I think he's got something he's going to want to play for. And one thing I want to say quickly is Calgary gives me a really big dark horse vibes. I know they're kind of on the tail end of the run of dominance of the 2010s, but Dave Dickinson, I still feel like he can rally his troops, and they have Luther, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, and Reggie Bagleton. Those are 2 very good wide receivers. So if there were a team to go on upset alerts, I would look at Calgary and I would look at Hamilton to potentially upset. Chris, to answer that question, I want to say yes in a biased perspective because I've seen more of Chad, but honestly,
Yes.
I got to go with Brady Oliveira. He's just been dominant from the jump because Chad's been good, but Chad's had some wonky games here or there with interceptions, just kind of like being a little bit careless with the football. So when it comes down to who would I like pick for MOP, I got to go Brady Oliveira. The guy's just been a stud throughout the 2023 season. He's just been the model of consistency, especially at the running back position.
I want to pick Chad too, and I hope he wins, but I'm going to go with Brady as well because as a running back, he's been dominant, and he's following in the footsteps of Andrew Harris. Nick, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm gonna stand against you guys. I am going to take Chad, and I think it just comes from the simple fact that I think Kelly is in his position and the way he's played. Like, he's came in with a team that won the Grey Cup, and he's made them better just with him coming in at quarterback. Whereas you look at a standout season, but they haven't had the same kind of success and dominance that they've had in past years. They're not the same kind of team they were when they won the Grey Cup the last 2 years, and then losing the final this past year to Toronto. So for that reason, I'm picking Chad Kelly because of how he's able to take a Toronto team that was already really good last year and won the Grey Cup and turn them into an absolute force that to be reckoned with. I mean, 15-2 for itself, because you've seen only one other time has a team had 16 wins in the CFL.
Which that Grey Cup, fun fact, was played in Toronto. That was
cool.
Yep. That was, Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that was Saskatchewan beating Hamilton.
What, for which one? You were cutting out there.
1989, when Edmonton, I believe, lost in the Western Final to Saskatchewan. And then Saskatchewan won the Grey Cup in the inaugural year of the Skydome.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
1989, that was a hell of a game. And Dave Ridgway, I believe, hit the game-winning field goal there. And, yeah, it just shows you 15, 16 wins in the regular season is all nice, but unless you win the Grey Cup, nobody remembers how many wins you do. That's how sports is. And look at baseball, Griff. The Arizona Diamondbacks, 84 wins, barely over 500. They now have a chance to win a World Series against the Texas Rangers.
I want to make a quick point. Sorry to cut you off.
No worries,
I want to make a quick point about that with the whole unpredictability of the CFL playoffs. Because look, if Suzuki for the Cubs makes a simple routine catch, the Diamondbacks probably don't make the playoffs.
That's true.
One little play set off an unfortunate series of events, and I feel the same way with the CFL playoffs. That's why I'm thinking those games, for as good as I think the finals are going to be, the games next Saturday, I think you're going to see two teams just go to war with one another. So when you see Calgary play BC and when you see Hamilton play Montreal, both those games are just going to be chaos. Which I'll say this, I would rather the game be in Hamilton because I don't know how up the Montreal crowd's going to get for that game. Meanwhile, if that Eastern semi was in Tim Hortons Field, I feel like the place would be rocking from the first whistle to the last.
Absolutely. And Griff, I want to ask you one more question. I'll get your 2 cents on here, and then Nick, I'll get your 2 cents, and then I'll put my 2 cents in. In terms of overall talent, where does the 2023 Toronto Argonauts rank with the all-time great Argo teams in their 150th anniversary?
I'm going to go with top 5. I would want to go towards the top, but honestly, I can't compare them to the teams we saw in like 96 and 97 because why? Those teams won the trophy. I would rather they went back to back. So I would rather wait. And let's say if Toronto wins this year, you can put those teams in that realm. But for now, I would still put 96 and 97 ahead of this team because why? They still don't have that Grey Cup to their name. They get that Grey Cup to their name, this conversation changes completely.
Nick?
Yeah, it becomes even more challenging if you want to date yourself even farther back and you want to look at like the Invincibles. Although they only played 6 games before the playoffs in the regular season back then, you had Argo's teams that the Argonauts were the only team to go undefeated and win the Grey Cup. Well before the CFL era. So I think for same kind of logic and reasoning, I would probably put them top 5, I think, right now. And maybe not right at the top yet. And I think what's going to be Cup and really get a chance to conclude their legacy, because that's what's exciting with everything going on this year. It's still ongoing, but then when the score is all settled, it'll be a lot easier to really place their position among all-time great Argonauts teams.
Griff, final question for you, and I'll get Nick's thoughts too. I thought Chris Edwards was a decent player, but how much of an impact has a Darius Pickett defensive back had on this Argonauts defense in 2023?
Oh, the leadership core, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that is led by Pickett and that is led by Wynton McManus, has been huge for this team. You go in the room, these guys, that's a reason why you see the club dub videos with like Wynton always just smacking the phone out of the hands. You go in, Chris, you've been in the locker room post-game. You know that these guys, it is what you want in the perfect workplace. The vibes are always high. This team is basically, they know how to have fun, but when they know that it's time to get down to business, it's time to put your head down and go to work. That's been the mentality throughout the last 4 months of the CFL season for this team. I think the biggest thing, too, is the fact, obviously, the Chad Kelly extension is handy, but look at all the coaches that have been extended. Corey Mace, Ryan Dinwiddie, Pinball Clemens, Mickey Donovan. If I'm missing some people, I'm wrong. Even guys like David Ungerer have earned contract extensions with this team. Because I know, I wanted to address that too, because I know Mace's name was brought up with the Saskatchewan job, which I just can't see him taking. But this team from top to bottom is just so flawlessly run that Murph and Pinball have the trust in Dinwiddie to lead the ship. And even too, like there's stuff where with the picks against like Hamilton and Edmonton, Wynton kind of like Dinwiddie will kind of throw some shots and I'm being like, oh, hey, like I thought you were a little faster than that one, because then when he got tackled on the second one against Hamilton. So you have all these things right here, and it's just it makes for a huge bond. But I want to say that too, Darius Pickett, my biggest, honestly, if I had to go with an Argonauts MVP that's not Chad Kelly this year, I got to go Javon Leake. I got to go, because think about this. This is a team that defense has won them some games. Offense has won them some games. Their most exciting game of the year was one on special teams, the CNE game against the Calgary Stampeders. That was a shootout.
That was a fun game.
That one play is what changed everything out. And so far is the most attended game of the year at 17,000. So hopefully the East Finals looking like it's going to break that. I know what you mean, Nick. I saw the seating chart yesterday, and so far it's only those bleachers in the north end, which if you're sitting there November 11th, you may want to bring a blanket. But it's based, going back to the original question about defense, it's just this team is just led on all facets of the ball, and Darius Pickett and Wynton McManus are true cornerstones to that. And even another guy I want to recognize is Quantez Stiggers as well, who doesn't have a whole lot of professional experience. He played in the fan-controlled football league, and this year he jumped into the CFL, and he looks like he belongs. You got other guys on defense that are playing great as well. Royce Mechie, Robertson Daniel had the 3-pick game against Vernon Adams. And I know I said earlier that the Calgary game was a turning point. I think that was a turning point to this team where it's just like, hey, we can do this. I think that BC game was the first game where, Chris, am I allowed if I swear for a second? Is that fine?
As long as it's not too bad. Yeah, it should be okay.
That game, the BC game for me, was the rest of the league going, oh shit, Toronto's for real. Because remember, BC was coming in with their chests puffed out big.
Yes.
They had just beaten Winnipeg. Their DB room was talking smack. And so, and the entire team was talking smack towards Toronto the entire week. What does Toronto do? They hung 45 up on them, and they intercepted Vernon Adams Jr. 6 times. So I think that July 3rd Monday night game was the true turning point to where the rest of the CFL looked at this team and went, okay, it's time to take Toronto seriously.
Yeah, I agree. That was absolutely the moment that turned it around and really proved that Toronto does. Because I remember when the power ranks were coming out at the beginning of the year, like you had Hamilton above Toronto, and I think even Calgary was up there. And it was like, but when absolutely curb stomped the Lions, it just absolutely, it then became just a 2-horse race between Toronto and Winnipeg. And ever since Toronto's clinched the East Final, like it's just been Toronto at the top the whole way through. But the attitude of this team is always great, with the next man up mentality that they always, no matter who's in there, they believe they can get the job done, and they have, because you've seen guys like Stiggers who come in and I will say I can live with Chad Kelly not getting the MVP of the year, but Quantez absolutely deserves the Rookie of the Year, given that he's 21 and doing the things he's doing on this Argonauts defense, being able to play multiple positions and being able to perform at the same level or better than the guy they have had to be phenomenal. And yeah, like you said, it's the sign of all the hard work that Pinball and Murphy and everyone in the operations staff has done, and to build a team that, as we see it right now, can beat anyone right now.
One thing too, Griff, before I let you go, is I've been an Argos fan since '79, and I can't remember the last time they had this much stability with the franchise. I would say going back into the '80s with Bob Obilovich, Conrad Tralloway, Terry Greer, Cedric Minner, and I grew up with that team, and they learned to win together, and you identified with them. And then I guess in the '90s they did have Flutie and Pinball, and they had some great players, but there was such a turnover with the organization. And I think with Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment's done, this team has stability. And now, hey, you think of the Argos, you think of Chad Kelly, AJ Ouellette, Andrew Harris, Curly Gittins Jr. I just think the stability in management, coaching, and with the players is going to help this team long-term in being successful in Toronto.
I think the exact same thing too. Plus, you don't see, like, look, there's teams where management, like Bill Manning, for example, doesn't get involved. Bill Manning lets Murphy, lets Pinball do the work because ultimately he knows those guys know football. It's when you get ownership and when you get the higher ups getting their hands on the blueprints, that's what causes for bad stability. You see it in the NFL all the time. Like even to like how with Edmonton this year, there was just all the instability within, and there was the whole stuff with Chris Jones. But you know what? They've kind of turned the ship around to where next year there's a little bit of hope there with Trey Ford. Meanwhile, with Toronto, you just have this team where it's everyone's clicking on one cylinder. Everyone knows be ready for when your name gets called, and everyone knows to what the end goal is, and that is to be in Hamilton November 19th. Because you know how earlier I was saying for Hamilton, look at what they have the chance to do. For Toronto, for them to get what could be their greatest season ending in Hamilton, that's just not going to sit well with Ticat fans. And that's something that kind of makes me smile in a non-biased way because I am a journalist after all.
Absolutely. And Griff, I was going to say, I want to say on behalf of Nick and myself, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Nick, final thoughts for Griff.
Yeah, thanks, Griff. It was really happy to have you here. I think we met there during one of the practices there at Lamport the one week. So I'm really glad we were able to have you and get some of your sports betting insights and just getting to talk CFL. You're always more than welcome to come back to our show if you want to come and chat some Argos football with us.
Just slide in the DMs, and you guys know where to find me if you want me back on. It's always cool to get invited on to podcasts, but yeah, I believe that was that was my first practice because that's the one right after Coach Dinwiddie signed his contract extension. So all in all, look, this season's been exciting, and I picked the right time to get selected to go cover the Toronto Argonauts, and I will be back covering them in 2024 at the current moment in time. Just got to wait now because fingers crossed that I will be in Hamilton, hopefully along with Chris on November 19th.
Yep, Nick will be there as well. And Griff, I probably won't see you on November 11th because I'm going as a fan so I can have a beer and sit in section 115 with the Rowdy fans. But definitely fingers crossed that we will be seeing you at the Grey Cup in Hamilton in the media box as well.
That's the hope right now. Hopefully I hear in the next week or two from Olivier. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
All right. Well, again, Griff, before we let you go, where can audience follow you on social media?
Okay, so social media, Instagram and Twitter are the same handle. They're at Mr. Griff B. It's in my name in the picture. I don't know if you can see it, but both are there. You can also find me through Chris's pages as well, because he follows me on both. But and then TikTok is Griff Sports Talk. You're going to find there a lot of betting content and some other fun stuff. And also, too, in my Twitter bio, you will find the links to all my Crier Media writings, whether that's about the CFL, NFL, other sports, etc. And as well, I do write after every single Toronto Argonauts game as well. Why? Because I'm right there in the thick of things. But that's where you know to find me, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to get to talk to me today.
All right, Griff. Well, thank you so much for coming on episode 14 of the Argo Bounce Live audio show, and have a great show yourself, and we'll definitely talk to you soon on social media.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Griff.
See ya.
Good night.
See ya.
Okay, Nick, thoughts on Griff coming on tonight?
Yeah, it was great to have involved with Argonauts football. It says a lot about how this team has really grown and its outreach when you look at like yourself and Griff and how many other people have come in and really sort of inflated the attention that this team has gotten, especially now with their running of success. When Griff was talking about, Bill Manning being a bit more laissez-faire and leaving it to the people who know football, like Pinball and John Murphy and everybody else to handle football operations and deal with all of that. It's shown, and you see that you don't have these sort of rumors that is MLS. Hear that now that they've won as many games as they have and are about to make their mark in history this week, hopefully against Ottawa. So I give a massive amount of kudos to everyone in the organization, and as a fan, it's just so rewarding to see a team put it together so effectively as they have, especially like for an Argonauts organization that has been struggling with changing hands of ownership and not really having a sense of direction. I think it's the most stable we've ever seen ourselves in, which is just such a really good feeling. Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, guys, you can follow Griff Bordignon. I hope I get his name right, at Mr. Griff B, and he's also on Crier Media as well. But Griff does a great job covering the team, and I want to say thanks to Griff for coming on. We're going to do our final segment. Nick, who were your Argos 3 stars of the game against Saskatchewan before we wrap this up?
Okay. So I will give it to, because I thought he played really well. I will give one to Cam Dukes for his ability on that final drive, and just overall he really kind of stepped his game up, having to come in at a backup. It was kind of the way we've seen like Chad Kelly in the Grey Cup step up and make that big drive to get them ultimately the win. So I'll give one to Cam Dukes, and I will give one to my boy Dan Attaboy, because he had an absolutely phenomenal game running that ball. So yeah, those are my 3 picks: Mason Pierce, Cam Dukes, and Daniel Attaboy.
And the Argos had a new kicker for this game. Can you just tell me a little bit about this new kicker they had that they gave Boris Beatty the day off?
Yeah, so Alfredo Gachuz Lozada, he was a kicker in the Mexican Football League, and he played in there for quite a few years before signing with Toronto this offseason. And it's if you remember Toshiki Sato, the Japanese kicker from the Japan League last year, he kind of filled in to play his role. But I think where you see Lozada kind of is that next level up in terms of I think his ability is slightly better. The Saskatchewan game wasn't quite the game that he had hoped he had. I know he missed an extra point. I think he missed 1 field goal, but I think he made the other 2 statistics. So it was maybe a little bit inconsistent, but considering that it was his first game and coming in so late in the year, I thought he had really good performance. And I thought what was really impressive was the power that he had on his kicks, on his field goals were not much different than Boris Beatty. I think he pulled the ball a little to the right, just a little bit too much. But he got in there and he made the adjustments, and I was quite impressed with his play, and I think it helps give Argos fans a little bit of that peace of mind where dealing with the global player rule, dealing with like you had Haggerty playing this game, but he was out the previous weeks, to be able to have a backup kicker come in and play. It's something to have faith in. So, and I think if I remember correctly, Lozada made the longer kick and missed a slightly shorter kick. So, yeah, I'm quite happily satisfied. And I think what's really a thing that we've taken for granted too much with being Argonauts fans, we had a slight stumbling period there in the late 2010s, but I think of the top 5 accurate single season performances, I think 4 of the 5 are within the last 15 years, and the 5th was Noel Prefontaine in 2003. So
You cut out there, Nick.
oh, sorry. I said within the last 20 years, the top 5 all of accurate Toronto Argonauts field goal single seasons are all within the same 20 years, in the last 20 years. So it says a lot that how good our special teams has been over the last 2 decades. Where I think we humble ourselves and don't take for granted how much how well our team special teams has been.
Absolutely. And my 3 stars, I'm going to go with Cameron Dukes, Daniel Aboye, 9 carries for 109 yards in his first CFL touchdown, and Coxie. I'm going to go with Coxie, 5 catches for 105 yards. And you know what? What I love about this team, they have a lot of talent, but they have depth. And if somebody gets hurt, next man mentality, and it's really truly been a team effort this year for the Toronto Argonauts. And Nick, I want to say thank you for coming on again for episode 14 tonight. And we are on Roku TV on demand in Northeast Streaming Sports, and also on WQEE 99.1 FM in Metro Atlanta, the home of Southern Talk in sports.
Chris, it's always a good problem to have when you can pick like 8 different stars out of 3, or 3 out of 8 to call a game. So as a star. So good problems to have in Toronto, and really looking forward to this Ottawa game. It's we think there's not a lot to play for, but we've seen with the Winnipeg game and the Saskatchewan game is probably 2 of the most exciting games for Toronto Argonauts fans to watch. And then and one of them was a loss. So, I mean, if that keeps up, I think this Ottawa game is going to be really exciting. I wish I could have gone. I was planning on it, but stuff comes up, life happens. So I will not be going, unfortunately, but that's okay. We're looking forward to the East final. Hope to see many of you fans there at both of those events coming up.
So Toronto, Ottawa, Saturday at 7 p.m. From, I can't remember Ottawa's stadium name. I
TD
guess
Place.
TDB. Okay. If you can't get there at 7 o'clock, you can watch the game on TSN, or hopefully TSN 1050. I know Mike Hogan was under the weather, so hopefully Mike's feeling better, and him and Ben can do the game Saturday from Ottawa as well. All right, Nick. I don't know if you cut out there, but fingers crossed that Mike Hogan and Ben Grant will be at the game Saturday night in Ottawa for the radio.
It will be.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you to everyone watching this live streamed on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X/Twitter, and Twitch, and also on our audio platforms such as Apple, Google, Spotify, and WQEE 99.1 FM, and Roku TV as well. And as always, Nick, I'm going to say this to you. Go Argos.
Go Argos. Take care, everyone.
Good night, Nick. Thanks. And we'll talk to you next week for another edition of the Argo Bounce live audio show. And I hope everybody has a great night and enjoys the CFL games this week. Winnipeg, Calgary, Friday night, Hamilton, Montreal, and then Saturday night, Toronto and Ottawa to close out the regular season before the before the CFL postseason starts. East semifinals, Hamilton and Montreal on Saturday, November 4th at 3 p.m. And the West semifinal, Calgary, BC at 6 p.m. as well. I hope everybody has a great night, and thanks for watching and listening to the Argo Bounce live audio show with Nick Small and Chris Pomay. Good night, everybody.
together fight the foe, scoring touchdowns for the blue on blue. The Argos will win for you. Full of fight and courage, you can't stop.